You know, for a quarter of a century now, this city of Winnipeg has been fighting a war. But this isn't a war with armies and battlefields. It's a war of attrition, an endless fight against an enemy that is constantly changing its face, its methods, and its sheer scale. So let's dive into this incredible story of escalation. It all comes to a head in January 2024. At this quiet, unassuming border crossing, officers find this: 406 kilograms. Let that sink in. That is almost half a ton of crystal meth. A single seizure so massive it just completely shattered every record in prairie history. And that, right there, is the big question. How on earth did we get to this point? I mean, how does a local drug problem spiral into an international crisis that lands, of all places, on Winnipeg's doorstep? Well, to understand that, we have to go back. Way, way back. 25 years ago, believe it or not, meth wasn't the main event. It was more like a Trojan horse, hiding inside the party scene's drug of choice. And this is where our story really begins. Okay, so we're in the early 2000s, and in this first phase, meth is really a niche problem. It's tied almost exclusively to a very specific subculture. Now check this out, because this is what reveals the whole strategy. Back in 2005, police forensics found that a mind-blowing 76% of pills being sold as ecstasy actually had methamphetamine in them. It was a classic bait and switch, right? Get people hooked on something cheaper and way more addictive, sometimes without them even knowing it. So where is all this meth coming from? It wasn't cartels, not yet. Nope. It was coming from right next door. From these small, incredibly dangerous clandestine labs, what police called mom-and-pop operations that could literally blow up an entire neighborhood. So the police response, you gotta admit, was pretty logical. The Manitoba crystal meth strategy did two things. First, they tried to choke off the supply of precursor chemicals, stuff like pseudoephedrine from your local pharmacy. And second, they just started raiding all the local cooks. And you know what? It worked. But here is the absolute turning point in this whole story. By solving that one problem, they accidentally created a much, much bigger one. With all the local cooks out of business, this huge market vacuum just opened up, and organized crime, specifically biker gangs, were more than happy to fill it. Not by cooking anymore, but by importing. And just like that, the vacuum was filled, which brings us to the next era. As the market hardened, the fight became this direct showdown with the violent, organized groups who now controlled the entire supply chain. The late 2000s and early 2010s were really defined by these massive police operations. You had Project Drill, which went right after the Hells Angels leadership, then Project Flatlined, which targeted their violent support crews, and Project Sideshow, which started to, follow the money. And if you want to know just how deep these gangs had dug themselves in, get this. Project Drill discovered that a City of Winnipeg employee, a guy named Stacey Jack Finch, was using his job to store drugs at a public golf course. I mean, they had infiltrated the very fabric of the city. It's incredible. So to fight back, police had to totally change their playbook. The old-school way of relying on risky informants just wasn't cutting it. The real breakthrough came with Project Flatlined, where they used extensive wiretaps. For the first time, prosecutors could actually use the gang leaders' own words against them in court. And that's what finally led to the conviction of major players like Dale Sweeney. But just as the police started to get a handle on the bikers, the entire game changed again. This next phase marks a huge shift from a provincial problem to an industrial cross-country pipeline. Okay, so this is the crucial takeaway here. The local Manitoba cook was officially a thing of the past. They were extinct. The demand in Winnipeg was now so massive it could only be supplied by these industrial-scale superlabs operating thousands of kilometers away in British Columbia. And if you want to understand just how sophisticated this new pipeline was, look at this number. During an operation called Project Riverbank in 2018, police intercepted over 300,000 private encrypted messages. The traffickers thought they were totally secure, but law enforcement had cracked their code, and it laid bare the entire logistics network. So the operation was a huge success. It dismantled a major cell, nabbing the Winnipeg leader, Daniel Finkbeiner, and a courier named Amanda Borges, who was moving what they called disturbing quantities of meth. And they seized 3 kilograms of meth. Now, at the time, that was considered a massive bust. Just remember that number, 3 kilograms. And that brings us to today, to the modern era. This is the final terrifying escalation, where the fight goes global and the threats become deadlier than anything they'd seen before. Now, look at this. This slide just says it all. Remember that big seizure from 2018? 3 kilograms? Well, in 2024, a single seizure was 406 kilograms. That's not just growth, that's a complete paradigm shift. The pipeline from BC was old news. It had been replaced by direct shipments from international cartels. And with this new scale came new, horrifying products. Police started finding something called cheetah on the streets. It's this synthetic cocktail that fuses the psychosis of meth with the physical dependency of heroin. It's basically a hybrid drug for a hybrid crisis. And at the exact same time, the weapons were changing too. Cops started seizing ghost guns, these untraceable, often 3D printed firearms, sometimes even equipped with silencers. Gangs weren't just buying guns anymore, they were manufacturing their own untraceable arsenals. The problem had gone completely global. Take Project Divergent in 2022. That wasn't just a Winnipeg police operation. It was an international task force. It involved the FBI and the Australian Federal Police. Winnipeg was now officially a node in a global narcotics network stretching from Colombia all the way to Greece. So when you step back and look at the whole 25 years, what do you see? It's just a story of perpetual, relentless escalation. This chart here really breaks it down perfectly, right? In 2007, the fight was against local biker gangs over guns. Fast forward to 2018, it's a BC pipeline measured in just a few kilograms. By 2024, it's cartel shipments of nearly half a ton. And by 2025, it's specialized networks pushing hybrid drugs like cheetah and armed with ghost guns. It's like every time law enforcement adapts, the enemy just evolves into something bigger and, frankly, more dangerous. Which leaves us with this one final, really difficult question. The story of Winnipeg's meth war is a perfect example of what they call the balloon effect. You squeeze it in one place and it just expands somewhere else, bigger than before. And if every successful police operation, every single victory, simply creates a vacuum for an even larger threat to fill, how does a war like this ever truly end?